And as always, I begin with commercial, Auburn Historical Museum, 41 South Street, Tuesdays and Saturdays, 9:30 to 12:30. We have the exhibit on vintage toys.
Nice.
We have the wonderful exhibit that our interns did on the history of the building, which is 100 years old this month. We think it's September or October. We have, of course, our football uniform, our old baseball glove. We have the Civil War uniform and our carpenter's bench. So, ghosts. What is a ghost? Well, most people agree
Kathy, how are you?
that a ghost is energy a living person leaves behind when they die, especially someone who has unfinished business. For example, should I pop off tomorrow, I'm going to be haunting Pat Smith, who happened to win the runner I really wanted that was in the drawing for the museum dinner. So let's hope I survive, because otherwise I'll be sitting on the runner saying, why didn't I get it? Which could possibly be a bit boring for you. Now, many people over the years, and I'm talking probably over 1,000, have reported going into a church in the evening and having the priest come out and say, I promise to say a mass for someone, and I haven't had the chance. Can you hear the mass? Because a mass is not legal unless there's someone to hear it. And they will hear the mass. Oddly, communion usually not offered. But they will hear the mass, and then the priest vanishes. Because he died before he could say the mass he promised to say. And there must be more than 1,000 instances of this having happened. That you should be creeped out the next time you go to church with you.
Which church is that?
All over the world.
Oh, okay.
All over the world, it's been reported. I haven't heard of any locally, but so what is it? It's energy. It could be their soul stuck until they take care of their business. It could be a part of the soul, but in those cases, it's usually not the good part. And it could be an animal, especially a dog or a cat, if they were a dog or a cat to begin with. Although some people say, oh, he's been reincarnated as a cat and he comes to the door all the time. I'm not too happy about the whole reincarnation thing. I'm not sure that God says, no, you didn't get it right, you're coming back as a cat. And that's going to help who, what? Every religion, every country, every society has ghosts. There isn't a single place that you don't hear about ghosts. So it's not specific to one area. And if everybody believes in them, there just might be a bit of truth. Funerals are for the purpose of laying the spirit to rest permanently. That's why you have a funeral, to make sure they're good, gone, and down. How do I put this? You know how some men don't listen to you when you're talking to them? So sometimes the funerals don't work the way you want them to because they're not paying attention. Or some of us ladies might be going, she didn't come? How could she not come to my funeral? I went to all the funerals in her family. She didn't come to mine? Or they laid me out in that? And you miss the point where you're supposed to go on. If they don't lay me out in a nice comfortable jeans and a flannel shirt, I will be back yelling at someone. So, synonyms: phantom, apparition, spirit, shade, specter, spook, wraith. Now, what do ghosts look like? It depends on the ghost, how badly they want to be seen. Now, some people say you have to be strong enough to manufacture ectoplasm. If you've ever been to a seance that does the whole ectoplasm thing, it's sort of like a white, foamy substance that is manufactured from the ether. And a lot of the movies with ghosts say, well, I can't do the ectoplasm to be here all the time, so mostly I'll just be a voice. They can appear as people or animals if they're originally an animal. Shadows, that's really big. To see a shadow moving along the wall or outside and there's no one there to cast it. Body parts. I've heard of people seeing faces, arms, toes, and they don't look 100% human, but they just look sort of dead, pale, and ooky. Foggy looking people. You may see a foggy shape going by. We have a picture at the museum of the ghost at Rocket Land, which just looks like a foggy, almost a person, blurry, foggy thing. I don't talk about that one ghost. Sadly, that's the result of a suicide, so I don't think it's polite. Sometimes you can see through them. Sometimes there's an outline, which is fog in them. You can have the top of a person, and the bottom is a spinning fog, a swirling, almost tornado-like fog. That one comes up later. Sometimes they manifest as a breeze. You know, when the windows breeze or something, a paper flies off the desk and there hasn't been a breeze. Sometimes it's a voice or a whisper, or just your name spoken quietly when you're alone. A mere hint of a conversation when you think no one's anywhere near you. Or as a presence. You might hear breathing. You might just know there's someone behind you. But you turn around and there's nobody there. What have I learned from my research? 1, do not do the research at night. Especially if you suddenly realize you have to take the recycling out. Very bad idea. If your car breaks down in a storm, do not, people, go into the nearby dark house with just a candle in the window. Do not get into the black old model car when the back door opens and you don't see a driver. Do not follow the old person with the lantern who says, come this way, I'll get you somewhere safe. No. And if you're driving at night, do not pick up the hitchhiker in the old-fashioned clothes. Because not a good idea. Now ghosts. Hope Cemetery. Bad sense of direction. Down there somewhere. If you go in and go to the left, there's a big statue of Jesus holding an angel. If you go near it, you're supposed to be able to hear the sound of children laughing. And some have seen apparitions. There are also other ghosts allegedly at Hope Cemetery, but you have to go there in twilight, which is not always the safest thing to do because there are other activities in Hope that you don't want to get to be a part of accidentally. The former Higgins Armory Museum, they had a lot of apparitions. I used to love to go there to see the dog armor.
Oh, that was so nice.
They had black shadows, unexplained footsteps, clanging noise, and music where there wasn't supposed to be music. And some people reported being touched by something. Just a tap on the shoulder. Now another ghost I can tell you about is the ghost of Monty. He was a Sato from Puerto Rico, a little dog. Chihuahua Lab, Basenji Cross. They bring him up. American Airlines flies them up here for free from Puerto Rico, and then vets treat them, and then they go up for adoption. He appeared in full apparition at the foot of his owner's bed about 4 months after he died. And I can tell you this is the absolute truth, because Monty was my little boy for 17 and a half years. And I walked into the bedroom one night, and there it was, clear as a bell. And he sort of looked up, and then curled up and faded away. It was, and there have been several times when I felt a weight at the end of the bed. And I'd say, Bernard, Boston, rescue, okay. Lucy Keys is the most famous ghost in central Massachusetts. They did a movie about her a few years ago. She was one of 10 children. April 14, 1775, Lucy was 4 years and 8 months old. She vanished in the woods at Mount Wachusett. The whole town searched for her for days. They dragged the pond several times. They never found her. Perhaps she'd been taken by Indians, because there were Indians in the area. Her mother, Martha, wandered the forest calling her name. Her parents, Martha and Robert, died. She in 1789, he in 1795. They had spent most of their money searching for her and following up leads. 2 men from Grafton returned from a trip to Canada. They said they met a woman living with the Indians who could have been Lucy, was the right age and coloring to have been Lucy. All she could remember that she used to be on Chusett Hill. But there was a letter from Key's neighbor, Tilly Littlejohn, saying that he killed Lucy. He was the neighbor. They had a dispute with Robert about the property line. He said he came across Lucy in the woods, killed her, and stuffed her body in a hollow log, felt terrible about it, took the body out and buried it, but never said anything. Now, when they were searching, they found her hair ribbon with a little bit of hair in it near that log. But other people reading the letter said, no, little John was in Boston that week. He was not here. He could not have done it unless she'd been wandering around in the woods for more than 2 weeks. Martha Keyes was often heard crying out for Lucy. Photos of Martha's grave show a mist around it. Some see a door between our world and the next and someone going through it. Workers at Wachusett Mountain to this day report they have heard someone calling for Lucy in the woods. And I did this talk at Kateri's last week, and someone there had a son who heard Martha calling for Lucy in the woods. The Portsmouth, New Hampshire Public Library has 3 ghosts. There's a curly-haired child in the balcony. In special collections, which is full of reference texts, there's a disembodied librarian who keeps shushing people. And there's a man who crosses the street from a health food store and walks straight through the wall of the library. So the Portsmouth library people have a great sense of humor. They did a commercial with somebody being a little girl and a voice shushing people and some guy appearing to walk through the wall and saying, this is what happens if your books are overdue. You'll be stuck here forever. Repeating this man wanted to return his overdue book and died owing us money and is doomed for eternity to walk across the street and through the wall and over and over. Which I mean shows a sense of humor about it. Now obviously Salem has ghosts. One of them is Giles Corey. At age 80, he was executed as a witch. You know that the Salem witch trials were all a land grab. And they killed off the old women to get their land. So they had the kids make up the stories or encourage them to make up the stories. It was a land grab. So they wanted Giles's land. His ghost has been seen walking around. As he died, he cursed the sheriff of Salem. And every sheriff since then has died in office or retired early and died of blood or heart disease. My question is, why does anybody want to be sheriff of Salem? After the first 10 or 20, you really think they'd say, can we make it something other than a sheriff? Chief of police, maybe?
Something.
So, in 1914, the ghost of Giles Corey was seen walking in the cemetery, and the next day, the Great Fire of 1914 broke out. And it broke out on Gallows Hill, which is where they hanged all the women. Many people taking cell phones around that area often see ghostly shapes when the film is delivered or when they get home, developed, or when they get home and look at their cell phones and see ghostly shapes that they didn't notice when they were there. And it's possible you might not. Some of them only show up on film. The sprinkler factory in Worcester, it's on Harlow Street, St. Bernard's Church, off Lincoln Street.
You can see it from the highway.
Yeah, you go down to the sprinkler factory, which has been around since the 1840s or 50s. There is a ghost that most of the people there have seen. It's a late 1800s, early 1900s outfit with dark dress with the bustle and some colorful trim. And she looks like she's on an errand. And she walks through rooms. She's steady, just goes straight through the room, doesn't look at anybody, goes through the wall and goes to the next room. Now, I had never heard about this. I used to go to the glass studio there that Elisa Manasian owned. And I was there once, it was just me and Elisa. And she had to go, she was head of the Tenants Association, she had to go to a quick meeting. And I was working at the torch and I heard something and I turned around and the lady just came right through the room, went through the wall, saying, okay, I got a 2,000-degree torch here, honey. That's not going to do anything to a ghost, might light her up. Oh dear. And I mentioned it to Elisa when she got back and she said, oh yeah, I see her all the time. And you thought not to mention it to me, you know? The Palladium Theater in Worcester. They were on the Ghost Hunters TV show. It's a 1928 theater. There's a spirit that haunts it. Footsteps and a floating orb the size of a soccer ball goes through the theater. Now, the rumor has it that dead bodies were discovered in a dressing room 30 years ago, and that might be the source of some of the spectral involvement. In 2014, give or take, a man spent the night in the theater. He fell asleep in the dressing room. And he had thought he saw an apparition a few days earlier, but he figured, pfft. So he finished his performance and he was tired and he sat down and fell asleep. And something threw things at him. And he heard voices saying, get out, leave, now, get up, go. So the guy decided to rethink the apparition being a fake as he's running out the door as fast as he can move. So not voting for spending the night there. This isn't New England, but it's a cool story. The Crying Lady of the Dakota. The Dakota Hotel in New York City is this huge hotel. It's right on Central Park. And it's where John Lennon was killed. Well, the Crying Lady roams the hall of the buildings weeping. John Lennon saw her several times. Yoko did not. She basically said no. You're imagining it, not a chance. Several years after John died, Yoko saw him at his piano. He spoke to her and said not to be afraid, he was always with her. So much for decrying the lady. She has more problems. Literary ghosts. Edith Wharton died in 1937 and is buried in France. But her spirit apparently wasn't happy with being buried in France. So she haunts the Mount in Lenox, Massachusetts, which is where she and her husband lived happily for many years. And for some unexplained reason, she is joined by Henry James, who was a close friend. He decided he didn't like where he was buried either, so they're both in the Mount, and they have both been seen several times. The Mount became Fox Hollow Boarding School, which became Shakespeare and Company theater troupe. Everyone has reported noises, typewriter sounds, and they have seen both Edith and James walking around. Writers live forever in their books, but some apparently want a little more. The White Witch of York, Maine. Children often meet a nice lady named Mary in the playground across from the cemetery in York. She likes to push them on the swings. All the parents see is the children swinging on the swings. And they'd say, well, they're using their little legs to pump, or it must be a breeze. Adults can't see her, but the children can. She died in 1774. A kind woman, an herbalist. She helped many people, but died at 29 before she had a chance to have children. She was a good witch, so she watches over the children in the playground. Isn't that nice? Now, we got a lot of calls for research at the museum. And I took a call one day from a lady who just moved into an apartment on Jerome Avenue. And she said, you're going to think I'm crazy, but we have just moved in here and in the house at the end of Jerome Ave, and my children say there are people walking through their bedrooms at night, and they look confused. And she said, I've tried everything, but the kids are positive this is happening. So I did some research, and there was a fatal train crash across the street, down a little, you know where Jerome is in the train tracks. There was a fatal crash, and the train was going to Boston. So I said, all I can suggest is you have the children point the way to Boston. Say, if you walk down this road, you will get to Boston. And they never came back. So that could have been it. Hey, we saw problems at the museum. We got Arthur Blais's name put on the Purple Heart Monument. We've helped with other things. Why not help ghosts move on? The Sagamore Cemetery in Bourne. They dug up a lot of graves and moved them from the old Bourndale Cemetery. The stones were mixed up. They didn't necessarily go with the body. Yes, the door's trying to open. Don't worry about it. I'm just the ghost of an old senior center. So the people are wandering around the cemetery trying to find their own headstone. But of course, since that's not where they're buried, they can't go there. So there's a lot of confusion there. Some people feel an icy grip around them when they're walking there. Many people have seen a man in a top hat walking along, but if you walk toward him, he vanishes.
Where was this again?
The Bourne Cemetery in Sagamore Cemetery in Bourne, right by the Sagamore Bridge. I've driven past it several times. 103.5 Main Street in Oxford. That's the area where King Philip's War was. You remember the story about the Indians running through, and they kidnapped a bunch of people, and they grabbed a baby and dashed its brains out on a lintel. They have the lintel with the inscription on it. It's on Main Street in Oxford, and this house is close to it. And there is a long drive with a small house, and there's a tree right in front of the small house. I don't know, I think it was a maple tree or something. And the tree is the ghost of a Native American waiting to leap on his enemy. He's sort of crouched there. He has a tomahawk in his hand. He's very visible either on a snowy night or on a foggy night. And I tell you this is true because for 8 years I rented that house and saw him every foggy night. And sort of wished him a good evening and I didn't go under the tree, I walked around the tree. And my dogs, I didn't have a run there, I just had a long chain for them. And they go out, and not one of them would ever sit under that tree. No matter how sunny it was. There are a lot of scary places. And I'm sure you've all gone into a place and felt it'd be very spooky. Danvers State Hospital in Danvers, that's where they invented the frontal lobotomy. Where they pulled out part of your brain to make you be not so crazy. I'm not sure how much it helped. Opened in 1878 and closed in 1985. It was abandoned. They were cited for inhumane treatment of their patients, not just the lobotomy, but other things. Terrifying place. Nobody ever wanted to go near it. So naturally, in 2005, they turned it into condos and apartments. What else are you going to do with a place like that? The graveyard with the nameless markers is still there. They didn't disturb that. But it's not selling well. Or somebody moves in and doesn't last 30 days. Some things you really shouldn't make into a comment. The Middle Ground Lighthouse in Stratford Shoal, Connecticut. Noises. A ship carrying church bells crashed and sank there. You can still hear the bells ringing. There were a few people on the ship, too. The Olson House in Cushing, Maine, 1939 to 1968. This is where Andrew Wyeth did most of his paintings. The lady on the lawn pointing off into the distance was painted there. I think the dog on the bed was painted inside. He did a lot of his paintings there. It was owned by Christina and Alvaro Olson. And I believe Christina was his model. It's open for guided tours. You can go in and hear the footsteps upstairs and the doors opening and closing later in the day. And lights going on and off when nobody else but you and the guide's in the house. And don't go there after dark. It's just nobody, I don't care, nobody goes there after dark. Alvaro, Christina, and Wyeth are all buried in the family plot down the hill. And they come up in the evening for chatting. Don't go in there. Madame Sherry's Castle in Chesterfield, New Hampshire. In 1920, Madame Antoinette Sherry built a magnificent castle with old world stonework throughout. Wood, stone spiral staircase that goes way up, and a stone cellar, and a few other stone doorways. Well, vandals, as soon as she died, the vandals were at it. They stole all the wood. But for some bizarre reason, they left the stone. So if you go there, and I did go there, it's very eerie, sort of something's going to happen. And there's a stone thing, and some people climb it. There's not a chance on God's green earth I'm going up that thing. I'm sorry. But they go, and it goes nowhere. So it's this big stone staircase that goes nowhere. Some people report seeing someone going up there. I never did when I was there. But I wasn't there that long. Wow, this is really cool. I need to be somewhere else. I want my lunch. Or not. Emily's Bridge in Stowe, Vermont. Goldbrook Covered Bridge, it's over Goldbrook. Emily planned to meet her lover there to elope. He never showed, so she hung herself. Ladies, no. He probably forgot. He got tied up with something else. Somebody else grabbed him. Don't do that for just some. So she went and hung herself. People driving through the bridge today often find long scratches on their cars. Like they maybe drove past somebody hanging there with metal tips on their shoes. I'm not going there. Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut. The ghost is the White Lady. She wears a wedding dress or a white nightgown as she wanders through the gravestones. Some visitors report being watched, and some see glowing red eyes watching them from a distance. Now, I have a friend who lives in Charlton, and I was taking care of her dogs for her while she was away. And I was out walking one of the dogs. They're big Goldens. You have to walk them one at a time on a driveway. And I had flashlights so as not to step on doggy landmines. And I happened to swing it around, and there was these yellow eyes glowing at me through a bush. I did not say ghost. I said, coyote, come on, let's go. But these are not coyote eyes that get you in this place. These are scary, spooky eyes. Pine Grove Cemetery in Paxton. The Dark Hunter is the entity who watches visitors. A black shadow of a man with a hat, and he has shown up on film peering from behind a tree on several occasions. So, for fun, take your camera, go to the local graveyard, take a bunch of pictures, and then go home and see what showed up. Probably not a good idea, though. Now, I read for the audio journal for 20 years. And when I was first there, it was this old house just off of Lincoln Street. I can't remember the name of the street it was on. It had a really steep hill. And you had to park in the parking lot and claw your way up the hill to get in the house. And the studio was in the basement. And I was reading this book, and I can't remember what it was called. It was a self-published book about the Prouty Hammond murders in Spencer. This happened around 1900. And my memory is often inexact here. But I can't remember. Let's say the Prouty son was marrying the Hammond daughter. Well, it turned out they both had the same father. So there were people wanting this marriage not to happen. And the usual roadblocks were put up. And, Mrs. Hammond was found hanging in the attic. Suicide, obviously. Well, she was disabled and couldn't climb the stairs. There was nothing for her to have stood on. But obviously she killed herself. And to this day, they say you can see her standing in the window of the house on Main Street in Spencer. One of the brothers was found shot in the back in a shed that was locked with no gun in it, and that was suicide. The sheriff was in on it, they think, somehow. And I remember the book quotes Teddy Raboyne. Now, Teddy Raboyne was just in the paper the other day. The Warlock of Westboro. I knew him because I worked in a pet store, and he came in to get cat supplies. And he was in it as a medium, trying to reach these people. And it was a really spooky book. And I was reading it, and there's 2 chairs at the table because the telegram is read on a team basis. Someone came and sat down next to me. I had the feeling it was a man, not that old. And I didn't see anything, but I knew there was somebody there. And he just sat there while I read the book. I'm reading live on the radio. There isn't much I can do other than, holy crap, bye. So I'm saying, ah. So I always wear a cross. So I pulled the cross out. That's vampires. Okay. So I had read another 20 minutes, and I finished, and he got up and left, and he never came back. I made a point not to read that local author before. Again, it was a bit much. But that was one of the spookier experiences I had there. William Saunders went to the Civil War in 1861 from Worcester. His wife hears he is seriously injured in 1862. So she sends letters, she sends telegrams. She asked the military, no word. We don't know what happened to him. He was wounded, that's all we know. Well, they don't know where he is, so he must be dead. So she had to hire a handyman to do the farm work, and she married the handyman, and he adopted her children. In 1865, the war ends, and William came home. He apparently had been a prisoner of war. He had aged terribly. He was heartbroken to see his wife happily remarried. He moved to a cabin on Mount Greylock and became an odd job man. He died in the middle of the winter, and 2 hunters came by the cabin, opened the door, there was his body. As they walked in, his spirit leapt out and ran out the door, and to this day he can be seen running around Mount Greylock. Yeah. The Clapp Memorial Library in Belchertown has former librarian Lydia Burton haunting it. If you're looking for a book, she'll slide it out for you. If you can't decide what book you want, she pokes out some likely ones you might enjoy. She's in no way malevolent. She's in no way unkind. She loved being a librarian. She wanted to be a librarian all her life, and so what if I'm dead? I'm still a librarian. I think that's a nice one. The Spooner Well. I've done the Bathsheba Spooner talk for you. America's first murder for hire, 1778, in Brookfield. And the whole thing was Bathsheba hired 3 guys to murder her husband. They did, and stuffed him in the well. So I went to see the well, and my dear friends from the museum offered to lower me in it so I could have a better experience, and I declined. But when you stand there, there's a real feeling of spookiness. I don't know if it's Joshua being upset at having been murdered. I don't know if it's Bathsheba who's sorry, or if it's one of the 3 men. But there's definitely a sense of remorse and sadness standing around that well. January 14th, 1885, Auburn, Massachusetts. Marcus Dunn, 58, was driving home from Worcester. He was struck by a train called the Worcester Special. He was highly intoxicated. He was hit at the crossing just north of the depot, Auburn Street, across from the mall. The horse was killed. The wagon was reduced to rubble. He rode around on the front of the train for a little while. They finally stopped. He sort of slid off and wandered home. He had a broken arm. To this day, on a foggy night, you can hear a horse and wagon going from Central Street down Auburn Street toward the depot. Very clear. Many people have reported hearing the horse and wagon at night. The most haunted place around here is Anna Maria College. Any of you have been to Anna Maria?
Yes.
Okay. The Zecco Performing Arts Center keeps 2 seats open for every performance for the college ghosts. One of them is called Teresa. She was shot by somebody. So whenever they have a play with a prop gun, they fire it outside. It works perfectly. They come inside, it will not fire. They've never gotten a prop gun to work because Teresa won't have it. Allegedly, there's also a pregnant nun who committed suicide. There were workers killed in a cave-in while making a tunnel from the dorms to the music building. And they have shut it off, but you can still hear sounds and have feelings there, they say. Many students, if you go on the website, many students have reported having a little girl knocking on the door in the dorms, having the nun walk by them, and of course meeting Teresa at the Performing Arts Center. And sometimes if there's a part of the dorm that's empty, they will party. And the noises are so loud that the living people evacuate the building. Someone left their phone in the Zecco Theater overnight and went back for it in the morning and found EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, spirit voices, speaking and overlapping and speaking, many, many, many of them. And the person said, I wish I'd never gone back for that phone. So if you think someplace is haunted, leave your phone. and see what happens in the morning. Probably gone, but. And so there's been a lot of reports of that. Now, there was a movie, The Conjuring, in 1913, supposed to be really scary. Yep, okay. The house is at 1677 Round Top Road in Burrillville, Rhode Island. A real house, and that's what caused the movie to be made. Things move at random, unexplained noises, and ghosts. The owner's children were occasionally possessed. Many children died in the house under mysterious or suspicious circumstances. Then why do you move into it? You know, in Massachusetts, they are required to tell you if someone died in the house. It's a law. They have to tell you if somebody died in the house. And if there are reported ghostly phenomena, they're supposed to tell you about that too. The house once belonged to the legendary Satanist Bathsheba Sherman, born in 1812 and died in Rhode Island in 1849. She hanged herself. It's in the newspaper. And doors are opening again. She was related to Mary Eastie, who was hanged in Salem. She was married and gave birth to a son, Herbert, whom she tried to sacrifice to Satan with a sewing needle. But somebody stopped her and took him away. She cursed all who had dared to live on her land. Other children in her care died mysteriously. But her tombstone has the date of 1885, even though she documentarily died in 1849. So was she out walking around? Was she out looking for sewing needles? What exactly was she up to? Hammond Castle in Gloucester. Anybody been there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great place. John Hammond was an inventor, over 800 patents, radio and TV and radar. And he built the castle. I think it has no nails in it. It's all wood joined up, and the hinges are really leather and weird, and it's round living room. It's very eccentric. He used to have a train that goes all the way around the building. And he had an indoor pool, a lot of artifacts, including skulls. Parenthetically, not a good thing to keep in your house. Many things go wrong if you have a real human skull in your house. Just, there is an organ with 8,200 pipes.
Wow.
Beautiful, huge thing. He died in 1965. Before his death, he designed his burial tomb himself in an ancient Aztec style. He often would have lunch on top of it. And he put all the locks on the tomb to open from the inside. Once you locked the tomb finally, it was locked. But in 2000, they built a museum because he was a very famous inventor. And they built a museum there, but in 2008, the organization running the castle had to sell the land the tomb was on due to dire financial straits. So they moved him to the yard of the castle. Yeah, basically. I'm not happy. Some say he was reincarnated as a black cat, something he always wanted to be, but I don't think so. The librarians say his favorite books are often moved and left lying around. Sometimes the organ plays by itself. It is, sometimes they see a shadow man where there is no one to cast a shadow. The castle is used for fairy tale weddings. The ghost of Hammond and his wife Irene Felton like to circulate at weddings and often show up on many wedding pictures. Now, I went there, and the tour guides were saying, we don't show his private quarters, we never show his private quarters, you can't see those. This is his den, but not his private quarters, we don't show those. And they show you the radio he invented and all the other stuff he invented. But not the private. No. So I went there, they have a big tower, and they have art exhibits up there. And I went there to see, I don't know what it was, Charles Adams or something. And I'm going up these stairs, and there's a guy behind me who's in a hurry. And I said, sorry, sir, this is as fast as I can go. And he really wants to get up there. Sorry. And it's narrow, so you can't turn around and tell the guy you're really sorry. I chugged up to the top, and I turned around to apologize, and there was no one there. So I watched the exhibit, and I went down to the information desk. And she said, yes, may I help you? I said, he's still here, isn't he? God, yes. Her answer was, God, yes. So apparently he interferes with anything he doesn't like. If they move something, he'll put it back. And apparently he wanted to see the exhibit in the tower too, and I was in his way. So, I always end with a good one, and I hope you like this one. My first stepmother, rest her soul, always wanted to live in Greenwich, Connecticut. That was her dream. And we lived in Mamaroneck, New York, and we moved to Stamford, Connecticut, and finally, after a few more promotions, we moved to Greenwich. We had a big house on Upper Lake Avenue. The house had been built in 1820. It was 30 feet high at one point, 3 stories, the usual 4 windows, and a door. And it had a couple of additions put on it. It was haunted to the gills. There was a little girl who moved things. I put something out and she'd move them around. And when my stepmother was dying, she used to have long conversations with the little girl. I think she thought it was me. I don't know. I was 21 at the time, 22 at the time. And there was a big headless man who walked around. And I used to keep a parakeet in my room, but I had to move him because the parakeet would do the... I was like, oh, crap. And then he'd look at me, and I knew it was right behind me. So I moved him to another room because that was a little more freaky. And the cat wouldn't come in my room, and, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a cold spot right outside.
Yeah.
So, in the fullness of time, Claudine passed away. And I got off the train, and my father greeted me with, "Am I too old to get married again?" And I said, "No, but be more careful this time." Because the last time he married in haste, and, you know. So I said, "Please be careful." So he interviewed for wives. And it came down to Marianne or Charlotte. And I went on the final interviews. Both interviews were at the Tavern on the Green in Central Park. And first I went to the interview with Marianne. Lovely woman. I thought a little too flighty,
Yeah.
you know, but nice. And Charlotte. Now Charlotte looked just like Ethel Merman, for those of you who want to picture things. And she didn't have much of a sense of humor, but she was brilliant. And my father was a genius. And I said, oh, these are intellectually matched. These people are good. And it came down to who was going to move into his house. And Marianne didn't really want to. Charlotte said she would, but her mother had to come with her, and the mother was blind and in her late 80s. Charlotte and my father were both 60 at the time. So, fine. So they got married the Friday after Thanksgiving. Now the house itself was beautiful. It had a spiral stairway that went up to the 3rd floor with a mahogany railing. It was lovely. You could sit there and look up. It was beautiful. So my ex-husband and I went to the wedding, and another couple came as witnesses. And then we went to the reception at the house with the 6 of us. The other couple left. So my father said that Donald and I could carry all the stuff out of the car and take it upstairs, including Charlotte's 3 main coats. So we took them up, hung them up on a coat rack inside the attic door, and came down. The coats came sailing down the middle of the stairs. So my father said, "You didn't hang those up right." Okay. So we went back up, and we hung them up further back in the attic. And then we hung up the clothes in the closet, and they all fell on the floor. So we decided that's it. And so Charlotte's mother was tired and went to lie down. So my father's there, Charlotte's there, the stairway is there, big arch. Donald and I are here, and he says, "Don't look at the stairs." Now, this is like somebody saying, don't think of a polar bear on a raft with a lemonade. Of course I looked, and there was this vortex with Claudine's torso and head in the middle of the stairway. I have never seen anyone look angrier in my life. And Don going, "We have to go back now. Yeah, we got to catch our train and go back to New York. Nice to see you. Bye. We'll walk to the station. I don't care if it's 5 miles. We'll just go." And 3 months later, they sold the house and moved somewhere else. Charlotte's mother was having long conversations with someone who was not happy, but who was trying to get Charlotte's mother to be an ally in this. But Charlotte's mother, being very fond of Charlotte, didn't want to push her down the stairs or cause her demise or some of the other things that Claudine, my first stepmother, was suggesting. So they moved. And someone else bought the house. And a couple of years later, someone else bought the house. And a couple of years later, someone else bought the house. And my father and Charlotte were married for 35 years. He died 17 years ago, and she died 1 year, 1 month, and 1 day after he did. And my 50th high school anniversary was 3 or 4 years ago, and I went. And for old time's sake, I drove past the house. I thought it had had a fire. The shakes were all bent in on each other. The place looked horrible. The place looked like a haunted house from a Hammer film. It just looked, oh my God. And there was a station wagon in the driveway, so someone must have been living there. But probably couldn't sell it. And the house went for a huge sum when my father sold it. And kept going for considerably less every time. But as far as I know, in 40 years, no one's lived there more than 2 years.
Wow.
And you could not get me to go in there. I was nervous enough driving by. I had a rosary in my hand. No, stay out. So that's what I have to tell you about ghosts. Does anybody have any questions?
I just wanted to ask, what was your father a genius of?
My father, you know the green screen on TV? He invented that.
Oh, wow.
Oh, cool.
He was the director of operations, scenic design, color control for the CBS television network.
Oh, wow.
He produced Ed Sullivan, Walter Cronkite, and
Oh.
all those shows. He once led me past Carol Burnett and Lyle Waggoner, and when I was 12, so I could meet Captain Kangaroo. I was less than pleased. However, I did only once issue him a death threat. That if I did not see the Beatles on Ed Sullivan live, he was done. So I did. I saw their first live performance. Now he was the foremost expert on theatrical lighting in the world. And when he retired, he went to work for Fiorentino, and he did the lighting when they redid the Capitol building in Washington and some other things like that. So that's what he was a genius at. And he and Charlotte were intellectually matched. They were a wonderful couple. They were very happy, and I wished he had met her when my mother died. Would have been better for everybody. And especially poor Claudine, who, as far as I know, is still stuck in that house. But, yeah, I've seen multiple ghosts in multiple places. And they're not out to get you. They have some purpose. They need to do something. And I think if any one of them touches you, it's just to get you out of the way from where it is they're trying to go. Because Mr. Hammond certainly wanted me out of the way. But some of us can only go upstairs so fast and no faster.
I heard he was a practical joker.
Yes.
That room that's wallpapered and over every surface, and you can't tell where the door to go leave is.
Yes, yeah, the hidden door. Yeah, he was. And so he just never left. I think primarily because they took him out of the tomb that he designed, that he wanted to be in. So,
So maybe if they let him back to the tomb.
but they sold the land,
Oh.
and it's gone. It got torn down, and they built
So
the
they don't
apartment
even know
building.
exactly where that tomb is.
Probably not anymore,
So did he play the organ?
Yeah.
He did?
Yeah. and still does,
Yeah.
apparently.
I'd have the guts to go there if someone brought me.
It was good. It's a good place to go. So anybody have any questions or anything?
What's your next talk?
My next talk is March. November
17th.
November 17th, I knew that. It's November 17th on the history of weather forecasting. The first published weather forecast I believe you'll find in the Bible. We can take pictures on Mars, but we don't know what the weather's going to be tomorrow. But I will tell you how weather forecasting equipment was invented and how we decided our temperature is 98.7, which mine never is, and how they developed the whole concept and how they used to plow the snow. Think giant rolling pin.
We saw that up in Maine.
Yeah. Yeah, some places still use them.
The Coal Transportation Museum.
So
Sarah, have you ever been to the Victorian House in Gardner? I hear it has ghosts. It's
I
haunted.
haven't.
That
And I know
was-
Spidergate Cemetery
Yes.
up in
Spencer?
Leicester, up in Leicester. That's supposed to be haunted. That's supposed to be the most haunted cemetery.
Yeah,
But I've never been there either.
try it sometime.
I'd rather not, but thank you.
Go there at nighttime.
I've been down to Newport, and I've been to the castle that isn't on the usual tour, that has the suit of armor that's haunted. And yeah, it made noises. And it seemed to be speaking, and I think it meant it. The worst part there is a monk who will follow you home if you're not careful. So this is where rosary are very helpful. Out. Yeah, it's an exciting life. Our museum does not have it.
No.
Just so you know.
You
We
need to-
did have the ghost hunters call us to see if they could set up in the museum overnight. And I said there would be no point, we don't have anything. It is not haunted.
Yeah.
So that, yeah.
But it could have been.
Yeah, after I go, I'll probably still be doing tours,
But not in the basement.
but not in the basement. The basement is not haunted, the basement has spiders. And they're lying in wait for me. I've only been down there like half a dozen times, against my will. So, thank you for coming, I hope you enjoyed it.